May I inquire?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Wolfe. So ultimately in March of 2025, were you hired by the defense?
Yes.
Okay. Were you asked to do anything or to review anything from the Commonwealth and any of their experts in relation to testing that was undertaken by them regarding the Lexus and Mr. O'Keefe?
Yes.
What were you asked to do?
My understanding is that we were asked to review and evaluate the report and analysis conducted by Dr. Welcher.
Did you receive Dr. Welcher's reports?
Yes.
Did you receive his raw data?
Yes.
Did you receive his 140-plus page PowerPoint?
Yes.
And did you undertake a review of that, all of that data, in order to evaluate that data?
Yes.
What methodology did you undertake at that juncture before you began any testing? Just your review process. What methodology did you undertake in terms of your review of his evaluations and his opinions and conclusions?
Well, I think when reviewing his report and his analysis, I look to his opinions, and then I look to what's the basis and the foundation to those opinions, right? How did he ultimately arrive at those final conclusions? So I'm looking for the methodologies that he followed, what testing did he do, what type of experiments, what type of data analysis, ultimately to provide that opinion.
Ultimately, did you prepare a PowerPoint presentation in furtherance of memorializing your review and opinions and conclusions of his evaluation and testing?
Yes.
Did you bring that with you today?
Yes.
Do you have that with you on your computer, or are we going to run the PowerPoint?
It's on this computer up here with me.
With the court's permission, could Dr. Wolfe present his PowerPoint presentation?
Okay.
Your Honor, I have a thumb drive that I believe represents the PowerPoint. Do we have this marked?
Yes, is this coming into evidence?
I'm agreeing it's demonstrably made on evidence.
All right, so we'll mark it for identification.
We can mark it for identification for the time being and discuss it later. Thank you, Your Honor.
Should it BBB for identification?
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Wolfe, do you see what's displayed or presented up on the TV screen?
Yes.
All right. Do you have with you, by the way, just a matter of housekeeping, something called a spotlight?
Yes.
Something that can do whatever spotlight that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
I may ask you to employ that, or I may take it from you at some point as we're discussing this. Do you recognize what's on the screen?
Yes.
What is this?
This is my PowerPoint with just the first page, the title.
If we can move to the next slide, please. Describe what we're looking at in this slide.
This is from Dr. Welcher's PowerPoint presentation, slide 121, in which he's indicating that there are lacerations on John O'Keefe's right arm and forearm. And he's indicating in this slide that the location and orientation of the lacerations on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arm are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right rear taillight of the Reed 2021 Lexus LX 570.
In coming to your opinions and conclusions, and I know this is a mouthful, did you consider the opinions and conclusions of Dr. Welcher in conducting your analysis and your ultimate testing?
Yes.
Did you rely on Dr. Welcher's report and his PowerPoint in reaching your conclusions and opinions ultimately in this case?
I don't know that I relied on it. Certainly, I utilized them to have an understanding of what his basis was for his opinion and what his opinion was. Ultimately, at ARCAA, we did our own independent testing to evaluate that.
So just to be clear, I'm not asking Dr. Wolfe if you agreed with his opinions and conclusions. I'm simply asking, did you rely on those in order to come to your opinions and conclusions? Did you incorporate them?
Sustained as to the form.
Did you agree ultimately with Dr. Welcher's opinions and conclusions?
Sustained.
You certainly were aware of what his opinions and conclusions were, correct?
The form, Mr. Jackson, on that one.
Were you aware of Dr. Welcher's opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
Are some of those opinions and conclusions represented in your PowerPoint?
Yes.
Are some of them represented on this slide in your PowerPoint?
Yes.
You indicated that this slide indicates that the location and orientation of the lacerations on John O'Keefe's right forearm and arms are consistent with the geometry and orientation of the right rear taillight, correct?
Correct.
Are the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm lacerations?
That would be an opinion from my colleague, Dr. Rentra.
Have you ever heard the phrase abrasion?
Yes.
In your opinion, are the injuries to John O'Keefe's right arm better described as lacerations or abrasions?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay. Slide number 2, please. Based on your review of Dr. Welcher's reports and his data, what testing did Dr. Welcher undertake or conduct?
So he did, initially it appeared that he did a static test, if you will, just demonstrating holding his right arm out adjacent to the rear taillights on the right side of an exemplar Lexus to demonstrate his theory of how the arm contacted the taillight.
What is a static test?
So I'm sustaining that. Ask it differently, Mr. Jackson. And I'm going to strike that.
What testing did you note that Dr. Welcher did with regard to this particular photograph? What is a static test?
Well, in a static test, that neither the arm or the vehicle is moving. It's just he's aligning his right arm adjacent to show how his arm aligns to the geometry and the dimensions of the Lexus.
Did Dr. Welcher appear to be wearing similar clothing as John O'Keefe was wearing on January 29, 2022?
Yes.
Was there any significance or purpose for that, in your opinion?
In this test, no.
Did you identify any limitations with regard to this sort of testing undertaken by Dr. Welcher?
Well, it's very basic in that the only thing that this demonstrates is that you can get your right arm to align with the taillight. Beyond that, it doesn't tell you anything with respect to what happens to the arm when it makes contact with the taillight, right? What's the motion of the arm? What's the damage to the taillight? What's the acceleration of the arm? What's the forces of the arm? So it doesn't answer any of those other questions. The only question it answers is, does the arm align with the taillight?
You're aware that John O'Keefe was 6'1", correct?
Correct.
Is the only person, let me ask it a different way. Can only a 6'1" person align their arm with the taillight?
No, the arm is adjustable, so certainly people of different heights could also meet that alignment as well.
Just by pivoting your arm a little bit, right?
Sustain.
How would you describe the ability of somebody 5'7" or 6'3" being able to align their arm with the taillight?
Just changing the orientation and the posture of your arm.
Was there any scientific significance, in your opinion, of this particular test?
Again, other than just demonstrating that it aligns with it, no, nothing beyond that.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So this is an extracted frame from one of his dynamic tests in which the vehicle is moving at about 2 miles per hour into his arm, making contact with his hand, his forearm, and his elbow.
What is a dynamic test as it relates to a static test?
So that's when something's in motion, and in this instance, it's the Lexus moving at about 2 miles per hour into his arm.
Did Dr. Welcher explain what the purpose of this test was?
From what I recall, I think it was to demonstrate that when his arm makes contact with the taillight, he observed paint transfer in the general location that there were the abrasions or the lacerations on his arm.
Did he appear to paint the taillight?
He did, yes.
Do you see that Dr. Welcher appears to be wearing an orange T-shirt?
Yeah.
Sustained.
What is he wearing?
Appears to be an orange T-shirt.
Is that similar to what was described as being, as John O'Keefe having worn that night on January 29th, 2022?
Yes.
Is there any significance to wearing that T-shirt?
Not that I can think of, no.
Did you note any or identify any shortcomings with this particular test?
Well, much like the static test, again, it leaves the door open to all those questions, right? About, again, doing this at 2 miles an hour doesn't tell you anything about, well, what happens at 10? What happens at 15? What happens at 20? Right? In terms of what are the collision forces? What's the damage? How does the arm move? What would the expected injuries be, right? This dynamic test, as well as the static test, doesn't answer any of those questions for us.
Is this test from Dr. Welcher considered a force calculation?
I'm not aware of him making any type of force calculations or measuring accelerations or anything of that nature, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine whether the damage to Miss Reed's Lexus was consistent with the striking of an arm of a pedestrian?
I'm not aware of any impact testing that he did, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the damage to the taillight of Miss Reed's vehicle?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did Dr. Welcher conduct any testing to determine the forces necessary to cause the injuries to John O'Keefe's arm?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinions as it relates to the speed of the subject Lexus at the time of the alleged incident?
No, from reviewing his report and his PowerPoint and analysis, I could not find anywhere in it a specified speed or even a range of speeds.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinion as it relates to the forces experienced by the taillight in such an impact?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Did Dr. Welcher provide any opinion at all as it relates to the post-impact trajectory or movement, if you will, of John O'Keefe's mass or his body subsequent to the alleged conduct?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Next slide, please. Do you recognize this photograph?
Yes.
What is this?
So this is something that you probably have heard and certainly I've discussed already, but this is looking at the right rear corner of the subject Lexus, specifically in the area of the damaged right taillight.
Did you consider this photograph in coming to your opinions and conclusions?
Yes.
What, if anything, of significance did you note about this taillight, other than the fact that it's damaged?
Well, I'm going to jump to the next slide, if you will. So this is now the taillight obviously has been removed from the vehicle. So obviously what's important here is looking at what is the damage that we have to this taillight. What components were damaged in this alleged interaction. So we're looking at the clear diffuser at the bottom is fractured and missing. Same with the ones on the vertical side. The majority of the outer red lens is also missing and fractured. And then on the back side, we also have some damage in terms of some fracturing to that black plastic, and there's also a chunk of plastic missing on the top portion of the taillight as well.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about that diffuser. If you could focus your attention on this area. Describe for the jurors what they're looking at in terms of the diffuser. What is the diffuser?
Right, let me see if this... So the diffusers, right where my mouse is, there's a clear diffuser that runs along the bottom, and then there's another diffuser that runs along here, and then it also goes up vertically. Same here on the bottom one, that also goes up vertically. So this piece was missing and fractured on the bottom, along with the vertical portion. The chrome piece here you can see is also fractured and damaged, and then the kind of the second tier, if you will, that clear diffuser was also fractured and broken on the upper section as well.
Was that of significance to you in your review of the damage to the taillight?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because that tells me that we have to have enough force and energy to break, we talked about earlier that 5 millimeter thick red outer lens. we have to have enough force to be able to get beyond that to now start penetrating into the interior components of the taillight to get to, again, those clear diffusers and certainly cause damage to get induced out the back end of the taillight as well.
May I have just a moment?
Yes.
Dr. Wolfe, did you bring with you an undamaged taillight exemplar?
Yes. It's up here with me.
It's up there. Oh, I was just looking for it.
Yep.
Thanks for nothing. Describe what it is that you brought with you.
So I brought a two-part assembly. So what I did is I 3D printed a bracket so that I could mount the lift gate taillight assembly as well as the quarter panel taillight assembly.
And these are undamaged in sort of manufacturing specs, correct?
Correct, yes.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Okay.
You have it with you up there at the witness stand.
Yes.
Could you retrieve that with the court's permission?
Okay.
If you could remain standing for just a quick second. Do you recognize what that is?
Yes.
Is that what you just described?
Correct, yes.
Describe it one more time for the court and the jury. What is it that we're looking at right here?
So this is an exemplar set of taillights from a 2021 Lexus LX 570. On my left side here, this is the lift gate taillight assembly, and it's attached to the quarter panel taillight assembly. And I will note it's not normally like that. Obviously, you can't have a connector, else you wouldn't be able to open the lift gate. But I've printed a bracket back here so that these can remain as one unit.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to have that marked as next in order.
Is that coming into evidence?
Yes, if possible.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So how?
May I approach?
Yes.
This might be clunky. Thank you. If we just have the tag perhaps put somewhere on the maybe the lift gate side.
And is Dr. Wolfe going to use it for his testimony now?
He is.
Okay.
Very
So
briefly.
give it back over there, please, Chrissy. Just give it to him one more time. Thank you.
Is it 250?
Thank you. If I may, Doctor.
Yes.
May I?
Okay.
Thank you. Dr. Wolfe, you indicated that there was a 5mm area of acrylic covering the diffusers, correct?
Correct.
What I'm knocking on, is that the 5mm acrylic?
Yes, both on the quarter panel part that you just pointed to as well as the lift gate part.
Mr.
Those are-
Jackson, why don't we give that back to the witness and let him do it instead of you?
Sure. Is there... Can you see through that loose material into the diffuser that you've just been describing?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, in this area here, there's a diffuser that's running along the bottom.
So, Dr. Wolfe, I'm going to ask you to not have that so close to
Oh,
the court reporters.
my apologies.
Use the other side of the witness stand.
Yes, Your
please.
Honor. So along the bottom is the clear diffuser that runs along and then goes up vertically. And then on the second tier, there's also a clear diffuser that runs along here and then goes up vertically. And you might be able to see it through, it kind of looks like there's little dots on it. So that's what I'm referring to in terms of the diffuser that's underneath. And that, again, so you have that outer material that's 5mm roughly in thickness. And then those diffusers are about 3mm in thickness underneath this.
Could you make a determination, and you can go ahead and have a seat. Well, actually, you may not want to. Could you make a determination of the space, the gap between the outer plasticine area, the outer acrylic area, and the internal diffusers? If you could just estimate that gap.
If I had to estimate, I'd probably estimate around an inch, maybe inch and a half.
Okay. You indicated that something was of significance to you in this photograph about the diffusers on the subject taillight, correct?
Correct.
Describe, now that you're holding that, what was it that was of note to you, Dr. Wolfe?
So as I mentioned, we have damage not only to this outer thick portion, but it was enough force and energy to then penetrate deep enough to fracture the underlying diffusers that sit below this outer surface, and certainly enough force then to work its way back through inducement into the backside, and ultimately there was a top portion of the taillight that was also fractured up here.
Was all that significant to you in your review of the subject taillight material?
Yes.
Okay, you can go ahead and put that away.
All right, so that can't go back there because it's in evidence, so why don't you take it and... Mr.
I was
McDermott.
just going to store it there until he's finished with his testimony, and then we can give it to the clerk magistrate.
Okay.
However you want to do it, Your Honor.
All right.
I have
Do
no
you wanna take
preference.
it? Is he using it still for his testimony?
Not right now.
All right, so, thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay,
May I continue?
yes.
Can we go to the next slide? What are we looking at here?
This is a collection of photographs that depict various fragments from the right rear tail lamp assembly of the Lexus. And I will note that, and I'll try to spotlight it, there are a few fragments in this photograph that are glass fragments, which, as I discussed earlier, there's no glass in the taillight, so these did not originate from the assembly. But altogether, from what I recall, there's about 50 fragments, I believe, that were counted or so, maybe a little less than that from the right taillight.
If we could go to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So these are photographs depicting the sweatshirt or hoodie that Mr. John O'Keefe was wearing on the night of the alleged incident.
And what was the role that this played in your analysis, ultimately?
Well, so one of the things that I noted, and I can go to the next slide, is there were a series of small punctures or holes in the sleeve, on the right sleeve of the sweatshirt in varying sizes. I think some as small as just a few millimeters. Again, I think there was maybe 10 or 12, I think I recall, on the right sleeve of that sweatshirt.
If we could go back to the larger photo, previous slide, do you see the right sleeve denoted on the photograph to the right?
Yes.
Does it? Your review of these photographs, what was the significance of the triangular sort of arrows or markers?
I believe those were to annotate or draw attention to those holes.
Okay, the defects in the right sleeve?
Correct.
Can you count those for us, please?
On the photograph on the right, I believe I see a total of 9.
And what about the photograph on the left, just the right sleeve area?
9 as well.
If we can go to the next slide. What are the arrows pointing to in these photographs?
So this is basically the previous shot, but what appears to be close-ups of some of those evidence markers.
You indicated some of the sizes. What were some of the smaller sizes of those defects or holes?
From what I recall, like I said, I think it was around 3 to 5 millimeters, maybe some of the smaller ones.
How big is 3 millimeters in inches?
It'd be probably around like an eighth of an inch or so.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are you describing when you say the word fundamental, or do you write the word fundamentals?
So I want to discuss some very basic concepts that I hope will kind of resonate as we go through the PowerPoint, so that you have an understanding of the underlying physics and what I'm talking about.
Can you go ahead and describe the role of an accident reconstructionist and the fundamentals that an accident reconstructionist undertakes when performing the kind of testing that you performed?
So, as I mentioned earlier, when I was describing what a simple definition of accident reconstruction is, it's the application of physics and engineering to collision events. So this is, I want to go through some very basic elements of that so that you have an understanding of the physics.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at here?
So this might be something you all remember back from high school physics, but even though it's been around since the late 1600s, we still use these laws today. So what we're looking at here is what I've done is just describe Newton's laws very simply. So, and again, you might be familiar with these. So, for instance, if we're talking about Newton's first law, an object at rest tends to stay at rest and at a constant speed unless it's acted on by an outside force, right? So if my arm is just here, right, it's just going to stay there until I give it a push or a pull, right? When I do that, that's going to induce an acceleration, right? So that's when we get into Newton's law, where if I apply a force to a mass, I'm going to cause it to change its speed. It's going to accelerate. And then Newton's third law, basically the law of reaction, indicates that when I push on my arm, there's also an equal and opposite force going back to my hand that I'm pushing with.
What role did these three very fundamental laws of physics play in your reconstruction or your ultimate opinions and conclusions following your accident reconstruction in this case?
So when we're talking about the concept of acceleration, what you will see in the dynamic test that we did and conducted, we measured the acceleration of an arm when it's impacted by a taillight. If we know the mass of the arm and we've measured the acceleration, we can use Newton's second law, which is force is equal to mass times the acceleration, to calculate what that force is applied on the arm, which ultimately you will hear from my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, to talk about that.
Is that broadly considered a force analysis?
Yes.
What role did force analysis, your force analysis, play in the accident reconstruction that you did or you undertook in this case?
Well, there's certainly going to be a correlation between the impact speed and the damage that we see. The higher the impact speed, the greater the force. So from my perspective, I was interested in the speed and the force to look at what's the observed damage to the test taillights that we did.
Do you think that's fundamental to an accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Did Dr. Welcher engage in any force analysis with regard to John O'Keefe's arm and the taillight?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So don't be too afraid. This is some really simple equations that I want to show you. So that first one, delta V. So what do I mean by that? That simply just means you can think of delta, change in. So change in velocity. So if you look at that equation, the change in velocity, really simple. If I've got an object that's, let's say it's initially, for what V naught is, initially at 0 miles per hour, I hit it, and it's now moving 10 miles per hour. That means it underwent a change in speed of 10 miles an hour and is moving at that velocity. Acceleration is essentially how quickly did that velocity change occur, right? Did it go from 10 miles an hour in a split second, or did it go to 10 miles an hour over a few seconds? So depending on the timing of that, how quickly that change in velocity occurred will determine what the acceleration is. And as I've already mentioned on the previous slide with Newton's second law, we can then take that information about acceleration and apply it to, if we have a known mass, to calculate what the force on that object is.
How did these math equations, delta V, acceleration, force, how did these play into, what role did they play in terms of the accident reconstruction here, in this case?
Well, they're extremely fundamental. And I think as we go through the PowerPoint, you will have an appreciation and understanding of what these concepts are. You'll see that I have plotted graphs with acceleration that shows the rate in that change in speed over time. You will see graphs of delta V, so the change in speed of the arm as it's being impacted by the taillight. And then ultimately we can calculate the force of that impact to be able to assess whether or not there's a mechanism for the injuries. And as I mentioned, that'll be my colleague, Dr. Rentschler, that will discuss that.
Can I ask you about delta V specifically? like to focus on that for a second. Is that okay?
Yes.
When you say that that equation suggests or dictates that an object that is struck by another object with mass moves up to the same speed of the object that struck it, describe that in a little bit more detail in colloquial terms, if you will. Sixth grade terms.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Probably not. Because I don't understand it as well as you do. If an object does delta V describe the circumstance in which you have an object that may be at rest and it's struck by another object moving, is that calculating the speed at which the object that has struck moves to the same speed as the object that struck it?
Objection.
So that's sustained. Just ask him a simple question, let him answer.
Easier said than done. Sure. Can you describe in more conversational terms what delta V is describing in terms of mathematics?
Right. So let's just give an example specific to this case. If the majority of the arm is struck by a 6,000-pound vehicle moving, let's say, at 20 miles an hour, that arm will experience a change in speed. It'll go from 0 up to about 20 miles per hour due to that impact. So that would be the change in speed. If my arm is at rest, stationary, is impacted by a 6,000-pound vehicle, it's going to change its speed up to roughly what that impact speed is.
And what about acceleration? What are you describing, or what is math or physics describing in that equation in terms of the time it takes for that arm to now move from 0 to 20?
Right, so that's how quickly that change in speed is occurring. So to give you maybe an example you're more familiar with, let's say you're driving down the road, you come up, you see a red light at the intersection, right? You're going to get on the brakes lightly, and your vehicle is going to change in speed, right? It's going to slowly decelerate. Let's say you're driving and a deer jumps out in front of you, you got to slam on the brakes, right? You're going to change your speed much quicker. So that's an example of two different rates of acceleration. One where you're mildly braking, right? You're going to coast down slowly, versus a sudden, emergency in front of you like a deer. You're going to slam on the brakes, and your speed change is going to be it's going to happen much quicker with that acceleration rate.
Are there circumstances in which the acceleration can be from 0 to, say, 20 miles an hour in milliseconds?
Yes, when we're talking about impact durations, especially of this nature, yes, they're not going to be, we're not talking about the impact occurring over a second, 2 seconds. That's extremely long. Even a duration of a couple hundred milliseconds in the context of this is considered long.
And then, of course, the force calculation is associated with the delta V and the acceleration calculations. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
In what way? What are we looking at in terms of that a little bit more complex calculation?
Absolutely. So if you look at the bottom equation there, where I have force is equal to mass, and then that top component is the change in speed, right? That delta V, V1 minus V naught, divided by the change in time, T1 minus T naught. So if you substitute in that equation, right, that's delta V over delta T, which is acceleration. So there's a relationship between all of these equations.
And do all of these equations, or did all of these equations assist you in coming to determinations and opinions and conclusions concerning this case?
Yes.
Are these normally accepted methodologies in determining delta V, acceleration, force, all the force dynamics or impact dynamics in an accident reconstruction?
Absolutely. They are the core of physics.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at here? Scientific method. What does that mean?
So the scientific method is a process that scientists typically use to be able to reach conclusions. And so you can think about it in this case, we make an observation, right? We have injuries to the arm. We've got a damaged taillight. So let's try to do some research to figure out, okay, has anyone done testing with that, right? Has anyone hit an arm with the taillight, see what happens, see what the forces are, right? And then we start to make a hypothesis, right? So what happens, it's kind of an if-then statement. If the arm contacts the taillight, does the taillight break? Does it not break, right? What's the hypothesis there? And at least my understanding of reviewing Dr. Welcher's work, it appeared to be that his hypothesis...
Objection.
Sustained. Next question.
Sure. Did you review, well, let me ask a different question. Going back to the calculations previously, the delta V, the acceleration, the force calculations that you described to the jury, did you see anywhere in any of Dr. Welcher's reports or his data that he undertook those core calculations?
No.
With regard to the scientific method, did you see whether or not Dr. Welcher followed this scientific method as you're explaining it to the jury?
Yes.
Sustained.
What did you note, or what opinions or conclusions did you come to about the scientific method, if any, that Dr. Welcher did or did not undertake?
Sustained.
Did you review Dr. Welcher's entire database? In other words, all the reports, all the raw data, and his PowerPoint?
Yes.
Did he undertake the scientific method as you know it?
Yes.
Right, so that's sustained.
Continue to describe the scientific method as you know it and you employ it.
Certainly. So, again, from reviewing Dr. Welcher's report, he indicated
It's sustained. I'm going to see you at sidebar.